Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. I'm James Batchelor, and today we are talking about what dealers need to be doing to make sure they have a successful and profitable 2023. Joining me to chat more about this is Andy Whitehair, who's the CEO of Autofinity. Andy, hello.
Hi, James. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Always good to have you on. Thanks for taking some time this afternoon to chat to us. Now, Andy, we're just a couple of weeks into January. I think it's fair to say that many people are still making those New Year's resolutions, and particularly for me, trying hard not to break any. But I think one resolution or key goal of many car dealers out there at the moment is to keep this momentum going, isn't it? To keep this momentum going, because 2022 was, on the whole, for most car dealers, a pretty good year, wasn't it?
It was indeed, yes. And I think, you and I were just chatting about it. Normally over Christmas and into the new year, there's a little bit of a lull and a little bit of a break in things settle down a little bit and everybody picks up. It doesn't seem to be that way this year. Everybody seems to have crashed through the Christmas break and straight into January. There's a lot of activity going. That said, of course, there are I think the expression that everybody uses at the moment is headwinds. So I think everybody's continuing that expression. I think everybody's been blown with the tailwinds through 2022, which was a pretty great year for most businesses. Last quarter of the year started to see some change, and now as you look forward for the next 12 months, it's a little, obviously the usual unpredictabilities come into play. So it's about how do you keep things going when you've got conditions changing around you.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's fair to say is going to happen this year is new car supply is going to improve. Used car sales, they might go back to more sort of pre-pandemic levels of demand. Prices are probably going to have a bit more of a realignment. But the important point in all of that is, over the last 2 years, car dealers have been able to sell things pretty easily, haven't they? And there's possibly a temptation just to sort of expect activity to be hot, demand to be hot, but that's not necessarily the case in 2023. I mean, dealers are going to have to be sort of on their game quite a bit, aren't they?
I've been either lucky enough or unfortunate enough to be in the industry for 30 years. I've been in the technology side of it for over 20 years. And I think the things that I keep finding myself repeating is as the conditions change, dealers have to make sure the basics are really tight. And when conditions are good, when sales are easier, let's not say it's easy to sell cars and make profit, but when conditions are more favorable, let's put it that way, sometimes the people take their eye off the ball and they don't focus on the essentials, and that can cause trouble, of course, then when conditions change, as we've just discussed, and headwinds come along, and then suddenly costs that have been acceptable during good times become weights against the business, and the revenues aren't so easy to generate. I think one thing I would potentially challenge is new car supply will ease. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows how new car is going to move. I think what we are seeing with new car is a shift in mix. So it's definitely going up. It was, I think it was on your site this morning. I was reading that Jag are pushing up into the over 200,000 range, and with the chip shortage, everybody's pushing higher models, and that's during a time when we got high levels of inflation and cost of living. So interesting to see how those two things will balance.
There's definitely going to be some challenges in terms of lead generation, isn't there? Because dealers have possibly been used to having a steady or even greater levels of inquiry from customers. And if we are plunged into recession, although we're not quite there yet, but it's sort of, we're teetering, aren't we? Yeah. If this cost of living crisis does actually really, really start to bite, and across the board for people of different affluencies or whatever, business could change a lot for dealers, couldn't it?
I think that's the message. It's not about disaster. It's about adapting to change. And having I worked for Auto Trader for 6 years, eBay 4 years. You get to start to realise that what happens in economic downturns is people are obviously more nervous about making big expenditure, like a new car. So then they start to turn towards a used car. Used cars are more expensive than they had perhaps imagined, because of course we live inside the industry, so we know what's going on, but the consumer dips their toe in and out as they change cars, and they might be a bit shocked as to how much a used might be, and then people will end up having to scale down either in equipment or age or something to something more affordable. But there's still opportunity to sell out there, and the used car market's always very robust through thick and thin, and I think it will be, as I say, down to processing every lead as a serious lead. And I can, many observers have looked at the automotive industry and gone, sometimes we all have the experience. You go into a dealership and you provide details and you don't get the follow-up, and you just think to yourself, well, that's just plain madness, because if consumers actually contacted you these days, they are ripe for conversion. And also making sure that your processes, your internal processes, are really integrated and tight. And that's where our business is focused, in trying to help dealers, particularly multi-brand dealers with multi-sites, where complexity of process and systems is a real weight that can hold the business back.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this before, how, and it's something that lots of people have said, but during the pandemic, you did feel as though dealers were sort of brought forward by 10 years in terms of their digital capacity and the digital systems. Do you think we're still going to carry on that that momentum of development? I mean, dealers need to continue being hot on the digital journey, don't they? Because it's clear more and more customers want to do some part of the transaction digitally, don't they?
They do. I think the stats from Google and Auto Trader and across the world have been there for years about how much research consumers want to do. And what's happening now is the consumers coming further down. What the pandemic has really driven, the consumers coming further into the buying process than maybe they were pre-pandemic. I think from a dealer's perspective, what they've got to look at is not necessarily more systems, but what we're looking to do at Autofinity is to help dealers to get more value out of not only the systems they've got to at the moment, but maybe swapping in systems that will give them more value. And you know what it's like. People, dealerships see a solution and they jump into it. They might do that in one outlet or two outlets or one franchise, and then they find one dealer group we're working with has calculated that they've got 300 applications across the group, all of different sizes and complexity, of course, and that's unmanageable. And what it really means is that when people think, well, I've got to do more online, they start to think, I've got to do more systems. And actually what we think they need to do is to take a step back, look at what they've got, look at what best in class looks like, and look at how they integrate better and how they process their data flows. So a very key feeling from me is that as we talk about online, and that leads to a conversation around e-commerce, the instinct is to talk about the front end consumer journey and the website and the look and feel, and actually I think that journey starts at the back. It starts with the fact that what most dealers and dealer groups have got at the moment is disparate systems that are held together by people and manual process. And as you try and scale your business, that's not scalable, and it also causes problems with compliance and cost and mistakes. And so what we're looking to do is to create a single view of the truth. So you pull data together into one place so that you know when it's marketed or pushed into e-commerce platforms, you've got a single view of a vehicle, its pricing. If you change something, the vehicle pricing or its equipment, that's replicated across all your platforms, your website, and internally. So another thing, James, that will be a key feature, and already was in 21 and 22, is hybrid selling or omni-channel selling, of having the same systems used internally with a dealership as on an online platform.
Yeah, I know this is a very basic way of looking at things, but But car dealers are good at selling cars and parts and accessories, and they've had to develop their online skills and their online intelligence. But fundamentally, dealers, they need support in this area, don't they? It's not a bad thing for a dealer to put their hands up and say, well, wait a minute, there are too many systems out there. I just need a bit of help and guidance on what's best for my business.
Absolutely, and we actually pivoted our business about 3 years ago, and I can credit some of our current customers for that, because they were talking to us about what they wanted is best in class, and where the technology industry was driving them is to full stack solutions where you take everything from one supplier, and that doesn't necessarily give the end customer what they're looking for. And I know it's difficult whenever you're buying anything, whether it's a car or a technology system. It's like, well, who do I trust? That's actually one of the reasons why we launched last year our Transform Consulting business, because we realized that whilst we promote and sell technology platforms, actually the people we're selling to half the time, as you say, are vehicle sales experts or fleet experts, and they don't necessarily know what they're looking for. They don't understand necessarily how to solve the problem, or even to shape the problem that they've got. So we set up a consultancy to just go in to look at the problem, to help them shape it and get visibility, and then work through a program of change that will lead them where they're trying to go. So it's a real problem. I don't I don't envy some of the big dealer groups with trying to make that digital transformation. It's an easy, we use it, powering digital transformation is our strapline. Actually doing that is pretty tough, and as I say to my own team, you're trying to keep driving the bus while you're changing the bus, so that's also difficult, to keep those sales going, the momentum of the business going, and changing the applications behind the scenes. But it's essential if they're going to succeed.
Yeah, I think some dealers watching this, they might be of the more independent dealers or the smaller dealers who, they've been encouraged to have these add-ons to their systems over the years, and by adding on more things, it feels as though they're developing and moving in time and in step change with where everything's going. But that's not necessarily the case, is it? I mean, you can add too much into your business, and then it becomes unmanageable, unusable, and ultimately unprofitable, can't it?
Absolutely, and it's interesting you say that, because I mentioned the Transform Consulting. Where we start with that is, where is the dealer trying to get to? So we start at the end game rather than adding more to the front. So what are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? How are you going to measure success? What have you got now? So where are you starting from? And then what's the right steps to get there? And sometimes that's to take things out. Almost always it's around data. And where is your data stored? Where are you holding it? Usually that's across a multitude of systems and bits of paper and Excel spreadsheets and the like. Looking to try and consolidate that and then integrate it so that data flows as cleanly and frictionlessly as possible across your business, with confidence, where you don't have to keep manually interacting and changing things, because that's both expensive and one of the headwinds that we were talking about earlier is people. There's a lack of supply of experienced staff, reliable staff.
Yeah.
And if your business is totally dependent on manual intervention and you can't get the people, then that's a double whammy. So really looking at the processes in the business, the data, the integrations is the place to start, not necessarily adding more.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make there, isn't it? Because you talk to some of the big dealer groups. We've spoken to them on Car Dealer Live, and they've got a massive skills shortage at the moment. They're constantly on the hunt for all different types of people, and particularly tech people. And they've become such sort of behemoths, haven't they? And they've got to be offering e-commerce solutions. And yet they need to have a backroom of tech people as well to power all of that. So sometimes it's you've got to think of, it's not just a motor trade business, it's also a tech business at the same time.
Yeah, it is. I sometimes think I listen to instance Robert Forrester, who's invested massively, and Arnold Clark that invested massively in their own technology teams, which is actually gratifying. I come from a tech background, so it's nice to see people taking it seriously and investing in it. But at the same time, there's a risk there that you can't be the best at everything all the time. And if you're a car dealer group, and that's what you're focused on, are you going to be the best technology platform builder? So sometimes I think, particularly mid-sized and smaller dealer groups, they might be better off trying to partner with a business that they can trust, and not trying to turn themselves into a tech business when actually their core business is selling cars.
Yeah.
And of course after sales, which is something that often gets forgotten about. And one of the things we were talking about is 23 being a transformational year. I think where it will, what 23 differs, how 23 differs from previous years, is the pandemic created the conditions for significant change. Mm-hmm. Significant change is happened, but it's happened perhaps in a with supply problems, with other things. It's been a very messy change, and 23 I think will be a consolidation year. I think it will be a year when businesses are able to lift their heads and go, right, now we've got to tidy this up, and we've got to tidy our systems up, we've got to tidy our policies up. Obviously you've got things like agency models, so they need to know where they're going from their new car side and their used car side, and new revenue streams will always be something that every business is looking for, and after sales is a big part of that, and we're putting a lot of effort into parts and accessory solutions, to try and streamline those as well. So because I've worked in vehicle side for, as I say, 30 years, and I thought that was complicated, and I got involved in parts and accessories, and you realize, crikey, that's even more fragmented and a lot more data problems. So we're trying to solve some of those at the same time.
Yeah. Well, finally, Andy, what would you say the three? It's a difficult question to answer, I know, but if there are three things which dealers should be taking away from this conversation that we've had and should be focusing on in 23, I mean, what do you think those could be?
I think job number one is to do, hopefully in conjunction with a business like us, a bit of an audit of what you've got and where you're trying to get to, and have the systems you've got and the problems that are often hidden in the business. So I talk to a lot of chief execs and operating officers and the rest of it, and I think sometimes they're nicely oblivious to some of the operational problems that people in the organization are covering up. So I think you need to expose that, really understand where you're at, then look at how you focus on getting good quality, high quality data integrated across your systems, and ultimately that you can have control and flexibility of your business, and you're not giving away that control to some of the big behemoth organizations out there that perform a good service but maybe take control away from the end customer. So I think it comes down to a bit of an audit of where you are, looking at the data and the system integrations, and then making sure that you take control and give yourself the flexibility to succeed in the future.
Well, fantastic, Andy. I think it might be good if we have a chat later this year and see whether people have been making good on those promises or some of those observations of the year ahead. But for today, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, that's it for today's Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.